Welcome back, SethBling here. I recently asked Redstone YouTuber that MumboJumbo if he had any cool ideas for data packs that he wanted to play around with, and he immediately responded with colored slime blocks. And by that he means slime blocks that work like normal with pistons, except the different colors don't stick to each other. So I got to work building it, and it was a lot of work, but I did eventually get it working. And he has spent the last week or so playing around with it and building cool things. So this is one of the cool things he built, but he put out a video that's coming out at the same time as this video that shows off all the different cool things he built. So if you want to check that out, there's a link in the video description. There should also be a card on screen, and there is some really cool stuff that he was able to build. So this, though, this is one of them. This is a walking colored slime robot. You'll notice that the feet actually come off the ground to walk, and he takes a step forward at a time. So let me talk a little bit about colored slime blocks. What are they? It's easiest to see right here on the right foot. So there's a pink section of slime blocks here, and there's a purple section of slime blocks here. Normally, if those were all the same color of slime block, they would all stick to each other. So when this piston pulls up the pink section, it would also stick to this purple section. They wouldn't slide past each other like they are, and the whole thing would just not work. It would break. And so this whole machine relies on that. You'll notice, for instance, here there's a blue section and a pink section of slime blocks right next to each other. This would normally be well above the push limit of 12 blocks, but since it's two separate sections of different colored slime blocks and they don't stick to each other, it's able to push them just fine. And what you end up with is you get a lot more power out of slimestone machines. You can build things that you couldn't normally build, and you can build things, for instance, a lot more dense than you normally would be able to get them. Since the slime blocks don't all stick to each other, you don't have to worry about spacing them apart so that the different groups of slime blocks, don't stick to each other. And you can just build things you couldn't build otherwise. So if you want to see cool things you can build with this, go check out Mumbo's video. He's got all the cool stuff. In this video, I'm going to show you how it works. I'm going to explain some of the technical details, and I'm also going to show you that if you want to use it for yourself, there's some things you need to look out for, because it doesn't work quite like normal slime blocks in some important ways. Alright, so first let's talk about the aesthetics of these colored slime blocks. So there are 16 different colors that match, the different colors of the stained glass or the colors of wool, that sort of stuff. So obviously these blocks are not normally in the game. So this is a resource pack. Let me go ahead and disable the resource pack, and you can see what's actually going on. And what these blocks actually are is stained glass. So yeah, I chose stained glass because there's 16 colors of them and they're transparent. In order to create a resource pack with a transparent block model, the base block has to also be transparent. And so stained glass made a lot of sense for that. Now, without the resource pack, when I place these and break these, I don't know how well you can hear, but it sounds like glass. Let's go ahead and put the resource pack back on. You can download both the data pack and the resource pack from links in the video description. Let's see. So with the resource pack on, sounds like slime blocks when you place them. And also, if you look in my on my hotbar, it says magenta slime block or orange slime block. So it changes the name of the block. Basically, it just totally replaces the stained glass with slime blocks. Of course, it still has the light properties of stained glass. It'll allow light to pass through and all that. So if you don't want to use the resource pack, that's totally fine. This will all still work without the resource pack. But I think it makes it a little bit more intuitive, make it a little bit more sense, and just looks a lot nicer when they are these colored slime blocks. So let's talk a little bit about how I implemented this. Here's the basic, functionality of slime blocks. This is all one group of slime block, one color. You notice it's sticking to this sandstone. If I press F3 plus B, there's a bug where sometimes not all of the entities show up, but it's basically these blue lines are entity look directions. So there's a bunch of entities, one at each slime block, and the entities are they're area effect clouds. If I go to spectator mode, you'll notice there's no armor stands. Area effect clouds are invisible, and that's why sometimes they don't render. But there is an entity at each individual slime block, colored slime block that I have here. This is a normal slime block. It doesn't have an entity because that just works as normal. So the important thing about this, and the reason I'm showing you this, is because when you place down a new slime block, it spawns that entity, and that's important because the colored slime blocks will not work if that entity isn't there. And it only is able to put that entity at that colored slime block if you're looking directly at it when you place it. So if I click on this redstone dust right here, you'll notice that my cursor is not over the top of the slime block when it gets created, and there's no entity spawned. So when I click and I'm looking at it, it's fine. When I click and I'm looking down here, I just barely missed it. If I'm above, it'll be fine because my cursor is over it. So you need to make sure that your cursor is over the slime block when you place it. If you're like moving your mouse too fast, you can sometimes get it to not place. So even then it's kind of hard. Come on. I know I can do this. I've done it before. Oh, there we go. Okay. So you don't have to be that careful, just a little bit careful, and just be aware of it. If your colored slime blocks aren't working, that might be why. So F3 plus B is the key combo you can use to see that. Here I've got 3 rows of different colors of slime blocks sticking to each other. You can see that there's stairs attached to each different one. Each stair is in a different orientation, and you'll notice that the stairs retain their orientation, even when that might be a little bit buggy. The stairs here should not actually be a corner stair because they're not attached to a stair next to them anymore. Similarly, it's a straight stair, but it should turn to a corner stair when I move it over here, but it's not. Anyway, so that's like a slight bug, but the important thing about this is it actually retains the block data. Each block has, or some blocks have block data, like which direction the stairs are facing and stuff like that. So that'll be retained. And that was non-trivial to implement. Here is a basic flying machine. This is something you could not build with normal slime blocks. When I put a block here, it's going to update this observer, which will trigger this piston, which will cause this magenta row to slide out. Magenta row is attached to this piston and this observer, and so it'll trigger this observer, which will cause this piston to pull the orange, and what you get is a pretty straightforward slime block, or flying machine. But you could not build this with normal slime blocks because the magenta and the orange sections would just stick to each other if they were all one color, and so it just wouldn't work. it wouldn't do anything. So this is a sort of design that you could not build with normal slime blocks. And here I can just stop it by putting obsidian here. This prevents this line from pushing and it stops the whole machine. I can turn it around the other direction by just updating this observer and it'll fly back over there. So this is a really cool and simple demonstration of just like a really basic thing that you can't do with slime blocks that you might want to do. And so flying machines become a lot easier to build, a lot better, kind of like we saw at the beginning of the video with Mumbo's robot, which is essentially a flying machine. It's just big and had little laser arms. So here we can see if I flick this lever, basically we're going to see this observer is triggering the piston. That happens both on push and pull. I actually had to go through some extra work to make sure that this observer would trigger when being moved around. Normally when I was just moving it over and spawning it in, it wasn't triggering, it wasn't causing a redstone pulse, and so things like this flying machine wouldn't work. So that was bad, but I actually have a special case to make sure observers work. So here we're going to see the 12 block push limit. It's 4 blocks by 3 blocks is 12, has no trouble pushing or pulling this chunk of blocks, but we're going to start to see one of those big differences between colored slime blocks and the normal slime blocks that are already in the game. So now I've upped the count here from 12 to 13, and when I push, this original line of blocks will push just fine because I'm not overriding the behavior of these blocks. But these, which I do have to, my Datapack creates special logic for to actually move them over, they're going to see that there's a push limit of 13 being reached, and it will not be able to push those. Similarly, when it tries to pull all these blocks, this is a sticky piston, it's going to pull this block because this is just a piston pulling a stained glass. But all these other blocks will say, whoa, 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 I've hit the push limit. I can't actually pull all these blocks. And so only this block will get pulled. And so this is something you need to be careful for because with normal slime blocks, if you hit the push limit, this piston wouldn't even activate in the first place. It would try and push, be unable to push, and it would look exactly like this even if you flick the lever. So this is a difference, and it's an important difference that you need to look out for. Now if I remove this again, this will work fine. And you'll notice it didn't try and like pull this lever or anything. So it knows that the lever is something that it can't pull. And but pull limit's 12, so it's fine. Here is a similar case. these blocks, it's not the push limit, but this obsidian block would block these blocks from getting pushed. So again, the original line will be able to push. Now there's nothing blocking it from being pulled, so it will actually pull the whole section back, and that's just fine. If I put a block here, then it will stop the whole thing from getting pulled, and yeah, I can recover that block by just doing this. But the cool thing about this, so it doesn't work quite right, if you hit the push limit, but since I had to, implement the push limit myself, scoreboard player set global push underscore limit 1,000. You can actually change the push limit, which is really cool. So this is obviously a lot more than 12 blocks. This one piston has no trouble pulling that many blocks. This doesn't like cause a performance bottleneck or anything. I mean, if you had a lot, if you had 1,000 blocks, it probably would, but so you can change the push limit, and that's a really cool feature of being able having re-implemented essentially how slime blocks work. Is I get to control all the implementation details. Now, if there's more than 12 blocks in a row here, or say there's like an obsidian blocking this piston will not be able to push, right? And so this isn't going to do anything. So it's not quite an infinite push limit or unlimited push limit, because you still have to worry about the linear push limit of 12 blocks or whatever. So that's a little interesting facet of it. It's not quite unlimited. There are some other interesting things you need to look out for. This was actually a surprising behavior to me. I didn't realize that slime blocks would work like this. When you put a redstone dust here, it causes this line to power the piston. Now, even though this piston should be receiving power, it's not pushed. This is actually a block update detector. Each time you update it, it pushes and pulls, and for some reason it becomes in a block update state. It should be powered, but it's not actually extending. So that is not how mine works. If I put this redstone dust, this is actually how I would expect it to work. And this is actually, when I showed this to Mumbo, he also expected it to work this way. That's like, basically the redstone creates a power for the piston. Then as the piston pushes all these things, immediately the redstone block is no longer above this redstone, and it shouldn't be powering this anymore. So that short pulse should cause it to separate from all the blocks. But that isn't what we see happening, which is kind of interesting. It's, I mean, it's like, this is what I would expect red slime blocks to do, but that's not what the actual behavior is. So the point is, if you just replace all of your existing slime blocks with these colored slime blocks, your machine might not work if it depends on some weird behavior like that. So you have to be careful about that, but a lot of the things you would expect to work do work fine. Now here we're going to start to get into the technicals of how I've implemented things and why I had to implement things certain ways. So take a look at this bunch of redstone dust here. As I flick the lever, that will actually turn off for a second. So even though the redstone block is going from above the redstone dust, and it's going to end up above the redstone dust, it still turns off for a moment. And this is also what you see if you have slime blocks. So I'll just replace all of these colored slime blocks with a normal slime block, and we'll see it's the exact same thing. The timing might be slightly different, but it's the same general idea. So with the colored slime blocks, I wanted to replicate that behavior. And what that means is this redstone block actually needs to disappear for 3 game ticks. 3 game ticks is how long it takes for a push or pull to happen. This redstone block, I can't just like clone it over by a block, which would be the easy thing to do. I had to do the hard thing, which is make it disappear, and then 3 ticks later, make it come back 1 block over. And so to do that, I actually, for each of these blocks that gets pushed or pulled by the colored slime blocks, I actually create a numerical ID for each block, put it into the scoreboard, create a dummy entity that has the scoreboard value for that numerical ID, and then 3 game ticks later, I move that entity over by a block, and whatever numerical ID it has, I put the block back. So I don't actually clone the blocks anywhere. There's no like buffer somewhere in the world where all of these blocks are temporarily sitting. They actually disappear completely from the game and then come back 3 game ticks later. So you might be asking yourself, well, if they actually disappear for 3 game ticks, why do the blocks stick around? And the answer is something you might actually have already noticed if you're really, really observant and know a lot about the game. Take a look at this slime block as I push and pull it. You'll notice it becomes opaque. It's no longer transparent while it's being pushed or pulled. That's because while it's in transit, There is no block here. Instead, it's a falling block. A falling block is a type of entity. I don't know if this will work, actually. Summon falling block. Yeah. You could see very briefly there was a sand block. So it's basically the entity that's used to create falling sand and gravel and concrete and dust and all that stuff. So while the block is in transit, I delete the blocks, replace them with barriers. Barriers are invisible, but you can actually see them if you're holding a barrier. There's a little particle that shows up if you're holding a barrier in your hand in creative mode. So it actually replaces them with barriers, which are invisible, and then creates a falling block with the correct block name and block state to mimic that block. That even works over here for these stairs. I had to copy all of the block state from the stairs, which means which direction they're facing, everything, into that falling block entity so that it would render correctly as it's moving around. But the result is, for solid blocks, they actually look correct. They actually look like they're moving, and it's not really obvious. You can also see, actually, there's some shadows underneath. That's the other effect you can see from the falling blocks. Especially while it's pulling here, you'll see those shadows. So yeah, the blocks are getting deleted, and instead falling blocks are being rendered for those 3 game ticks until it gets to the destination. I can put the actual block back. And yeah, so this is even more apparent if you take the resource pack off. So let me do that. It's just stained glass when it becomes opaque is just very obvious. Like it's actually a really cool looking block. Like I kind of wish they just had solid block. It looks kind of like concrete, but even more pure of a color. But yeah, it's very obvious. So that's one of the things about the resource pack that's kind of nice, is that it looks a little bit less obvious when you push and pull the blocks. Okay. So I covered that. I think I've covered just about everything at this point. This was very hard to get working correctly. It took a lot of work. There was a lot of little bugs or little quirks to it. As we've seen, it doesn't work fully correctly, right? There's some things that don't work quite like slime blocks do. I also would advise you not to mix slime blocks, regular slime blocks and colored slime blocks. If you're going to do slime block creations, probably just stick to colored slime blocks, because these slime blocks will stick to any adjacent stained glass, and it's going to cause errors. Yeah. Errors is a nice way of putting it. It's not going to work correctly, but if you just have normal slime blocks and you use them in your builds, it'll work pretty much correctly, as we saw with Mumbo's giant robot at the beginning of the video. But man, this is a really cool idea by MumboJumbo. I want to say one last thing, and that is, I think Mojang should actually add this to the game. After sort of re-implementing slime blocks essentially myself, for a couple of weeks. It was a lot of work to get it working, but once I got it working, it was a very simple change, kind of a one-line code change to make sure that slime blocks of different colors didn't actually interact with each other. And I think that in the existing code base, I don't know for sure because I haven't seen their code, I think it would be a very small change to make different colors of slime blocks that don't actually push or pull each other, don't stick to each other, because there's already a block that does this, glazed terracotta. A slime block will not stick to glazed terracotta. And I think it would be a very small code change, but it creates so much power in terms of what a slime stoner can actually do with slime blocks. And one other cool idea that Mumbo had was you could have these different colors of slime blocks appear in different colored slimes, slime mobs, in different biomes. Or I guess you would get different slime balls, different colored slime balls, and then craft different colored slime blocks. And if you did that, and the only way to get the different colors of slime blocks was to go to different biomes and hunt down slimes, then it would add a cool adventuring aspect to it, where if you want certain colors for your build, you have to actually go find that biome. You have to build a slime farm there or hunt down slimes there. And it could be a really cool way to encourage adventuring. And if you just wanted to build your average random slime machine with a color, maybe 3 different colors of slime, which is probably all you really need for any given slime machine, you just need to find 3 different biomes, and that's not too hard. Pretty much anyone can do that. I think it'd be really cool to add to the game. It's just, it might be a little bit of vanity, but But honestly, I think it just adds so much power to what redstoners could do with slime blocks. I think it'd be worth it. All right. Once again, if you want to see all the cool stuff you can do with this, go check out MumboJumbo's video. There's a link in the video description. And if you want to play around with it for yourself, there is a link to the Datapack and the resource pack as well in the video description. And you can download them. It doesn't require any setup. You just, put them in the right folders and enable them, and they will be good to go. Just make sure that when you're placing down slime blocks, you're actually looking at them. It's really important. That's about it. Thanks for watching.